Welcome, everyone, to Adtaxi's discussion on the future of digital marketing. As part of Adtaxi's 15th anniversary celebration, we thought it'd be good to get 6 of our experts, well, 5 and me together, to discuss the future of digital marketing and a lot of the topics that are at the forefront here. So I'm Bob Jameson. I'm the VP of the East at Adtaxi. I'll be moderating this discussion, but I brought along some of my smart friends, first of which is Ethan Mowry. Ethan, if you could introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm Ethan, and I head up our QA and ad tech integration team over here. So I deal with a lot of the tagging and communicating between different ad platforms and fun stuff like that.
Right on. My name is Brian Kroll, a longtime listener, first-time caller. Thanks for having me, Bob. I'm our VP of Strategic Accounts, and I work with all of our top advertisers and been doing this a long time and trying to help people get the best they possibly can out of all of their campaigns.
How's it going, everybody? Chris Berkey, Director of Client Services for the East Region. I've been with Adtaxi for 11 years. It doesn't feel like it, but it's been awesome to be here, seen a lot of changes. Going to see a lot more. We'll talk about that today. My role, I get to play the bridge between sales and operations, so it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. And I'm Megan Baccord, Director of the Client Services team for the West Coast. So I'm the East Coast or West Coast version of Berkey. My team is the strategist and account manager. So we're the ones also in the weeds talking to clients on a regular basis and also pulling the analysis and reporting to chat through with our clients to hear them out and all of their problems and changes.
And I'm Natalie Andrews. I'm the manager of social operations at Adtaxi. I've been in the social world for 10 years now, 5 being with Adtaxi, and I've seen a lot of changes throughout the platforms, and I'm very excited to talk about today's discussion just because I've seen it a lot in all social platforms.
Great. Thanks, guys. So I guess we might as well get right into it since I think we have quite a bit of topics that I know that we want to talk about. The first one, which I think is probably unavoidable, is are we going to need to look for jobs? Is AI going to replace us soon?
No.
No.
Not necessarily.
Augment. Yes. Augment for sure.
Cool. So obviously that is probably the thing that's made its way into a lot of aspects of everyday life across the board, but in digital marketing, it seems to be everywhere. So I think at this point, everyone should be embracing it. I guess you guys would agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, I for one, this is like the most exciting time for me. Like I love this. Every single day I wake up and I have my coffee and I read like these trades, subscribe to like a bunch of different sort of like TLDR and the Neuron, like a bunch of different newsletters where it just talks about all of the advances in AI across multiple different spectrums, right? And a lot of it does not necessarily have to do with marketing. It's mainly more around like what's happening with ChatGPT, what's happening with Claude, what's happening with Perplexity, what's happening with it's like all the different advancements that all of these different models are making. And it's fascinating to me to sort of think through this for a couple of different reasons. One, because like I use AI, Gen AI a ton for coding and for like, like basically like sort of product ideation and working through like what we can do, how we can use this as an agency to get smarter and better. So we don't have to hire a team, extra 10 developers or whatever. We can use people we have, but just get stuff out there faster in terms of like product ideas or just enhancements, things that can make all of our lives easier. So like that's fascinating. But then you also see things that are out there all the time about advancements, how these Gen AI agents are starting to creep more and more into the sort of Google's domain in terms of search, right? So like ChatGPT just announced that they are going to offer shopping, that they're going to be able to like do like shopping type searches and stuff. So I don't know about you guys, and I would not be as freaked out. I think for us, it's a fascinating time. I think for like the large platforms out there, like they are going to be the ones that are scrambling to probably try and figure out how this impacts them. Because there was an article that I read a couple weeks ago or months ago that basically like that everybody now has a country of geniuses at their disposal. because you've got all of these chatbots where it's like you can kind of ask anybody to do anything. And so I think it's just a fascinating time, personally.
I totally agree with you, Brian. I mean, Natalie and I, we joke about how we use AI to build like our grocery list or like help with meal planning, but it also can help within the day-to-day world of like what we do in the platforms. Like we see how PMAX has evolved, but I think what happens with PMAX is, and those other AI tactics within the platforms, is that it's only as smart as the humans behind it.
Yeah.
So we're sitting there analyzing the data, looking at the numbers and saying, hey, there was a sale this week. That's why the platform got more data into it and then made it smarter. But what happens when there isn't a sale? So you have to be constantly evolving with the platform and working alongside it, alongside these smart bidding technologies, or within Facebook, the audience findings. I just think that it helps us make sure that our jobs are safe, one, but it also helps with us to to identify areas of further advancement within the platforms, and even within our analysis, and even within our actual like action items that we do with optimizations.
Yeah. And I agree. Just kind of to go alongside of that, seeing what's in Meta specifically. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg on his Meta quarterly earnings report was just basically saying full speed ahead with AI automation and kind of using more of a creative suite within the platform to offer these services to clients, which I'm all for. I just am also hesitant to make sure that it delivers properly for our clients. And I think obviously using it as a supplement to our existing campaigns is the way to go. So I think kind of moving forward with it and still being hesitant about it is completely normal. But again, I'm excited about it. Same with Brian and Megan.
Yeah. Trust and verify.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Megan, you brought up analysis, and that's one of the things that we're working on here is actually pulling the data out and using AI to help our analysis, right? Because, you would agree, we're doing it manually now a lot of the time, and it could take hours for some of our larger accounts. If we can teach AI to tell us these things quicker, find trends quicker, makes our jobs better. And you still, like you said, we need the people behind it, obviously, to interpret the findings that come out of it. But doing that manual work of dropping it into an Excel sheet, using a pivot table, things like that, that could hopefully go away, make our teams more efficient, be able to take on more accounts, which would be really, really awesome.
Yeah, I think like the interesting point to all that is, we keep talking about the human element that still remains here. And I think, Bob made a joke about us losing our jobs, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. Platforms don't communicate with each other. So as great as like Google's AI and automation might be, I don't foresee a future anytime soon that Facebook also uses that same AI and leverages that same information. So in some sense, I think us humans that are able to connect these pieces together and actually feed the AI and take those learnings out and then apply them to the different ad platforms is going to become even more crucial, especially because these things are very black box. You don't know what happens. And so I think the outside human interaction is going to be really crucial moving forward to say, hey, are you using this AI? How are you using this AI? Maybe you need to leverage this other tool with it. So while all these things are great about the efficiency and stuff like that and the automation, I really don't see humans going away anytime soon, even though we kind of joke about it. I just see role shifting. How does the role of the campaign manager look in 5 years versus what it looks like today? You're probably not going to be playing whack-a-mole looking through a search terms report and making sure you block stuff. I think it's going to be a lot more strategic and high level, but we'll wait and see. So I think, the discussion is really kind of interesting. And I like that you guys continue to harp on where does the human come in here? Because as great as these tools are and as much as they're catching our attention, I don't think they're going to be the be all end all for us. I think they're just going to make us better at what we do.
100%.
Ethan brought up the fact that the AI, the humans that seem to embrace AI and almost act as the ones that can kind of interpret, like, how good is this data and where are the flaws? Knowing the ins and outs of that, it sounds like you're saying that that's going to create a whole new employment sector almost for people that can kind of be the handlers of it.
Yeah, I would say so. What you feed to it. So, if you've heard the term prompt engineering, like, what are the prompts that you're feeding into this? That's a human that's coming up with those prompts, and that probably won't change. Or we'll want to have that involvement when we see things go a little bit haywire, and it's like, oh, human needs to come in here and prompt this tool to look the other direction. So, yeah, I definitely could see some new roles coming up and into play that. I might be too old for it by the time they come out, but young people are already working with these tools and figuring out ways to manipulate them to get what they want out of it. So the future's exciting.
Yeah, and I think it all comes down to like the structure, right? So like when you think about the individual platforms themselves, this kind of like ties back what you were saying, Megan, what you're saying, Natalie, right? If you have like these systems all need very structured data. The better the structure of the data and the better that you can the better the signal quality that you can give the data is absolutely massive too, because if you're giving it strong signals and saying, hey, this is something that I want, right? Focus on this type of a signal, try and find me more of these or whatever it be. If you give it a whole bunch of unstructured data sets and it has to try and figure out, like for instance, in search, like if you were to say like, here's 50,000 different SKUs, PMax, go ahead and figure, just go sell. Like it will have no idea. It's just going to spin. It spends a little bit here, a little bit there, whatever. But like, I think that's something where like the human element to say like, well, what if we think about like how the campaign is structured and based on the client's goals, like how do we structure a campaign for search or for social so that we feed these AIs the right amount of data and tell it the request the right reasonable outcome so that it can actually like achieve it and learn from it and do more. So it's sort of like focusing in on a smaller set and saying, like look here and do the best you can here. And from like an analysis standpoint, like I see that, it's not going to solve everything for us. It might basically give us instead of having us, like giving, saying here's a map and a shovel, but there's no X marks the spot. Now it's saying you should dig here, you should dig here, you should dig here. Here are the different places where you should look to understand what's going on, so that you can try and find some relevant learnings. Because a lot of what we do as well from a marketing standpoint, and this is something that I don't think, maybe it's never going to change, but we're handling like that aspect. There's a whole other aspect too, to your point of like, there might be a sale, there might be something else that somebody did on their side that really impacts performance that we just don't know about. And so that's something where like the AI on its operating in its own sort of silo is never going to understand. And to your point, Ethan, about them all using different models, like Meta's, Llama model is going to be totally different than Gemini, and they're constructed differently. Even though they're all large language models are constructed differently, they use different sources of information to sort of come up with their reasoning. And so I think that's why I think it's just so exciting for like to be in this agency environment, is we don't work for just one platform, and we're not beholden to just be like, all right, you know what, just let PMax just do it. Just tell everybody to use PMax, as opposed to us saying like, is that really the right thing for the business? Because that's not that's a one element of the ecosystem.
And I think something you bring up is we're in this agency landscape, and we don't just see one client, we see multiple clients, but we also see multiple verticals. So there have been a multitude of campaigns that have just ran their course, and we've seen it work in some areas and some not. And I think giving us that flexibility to see all of that is really just, it's fascinating where we've come from and where we are today. And I can't even imagine where we'll go from here.
Awesome discussion, guys. I think this kind of flows right into the next topic, and I know we want to talk about the future and the changing landscape in digital and digital video and audio. But if we could talk a little bit about the future of paid search, because Brian, you just mentioned that we're not necessarily beholden to any one platform. Well, the biggest that comes to mind for me would obviously exist in the search world, and I think this is where there's increasing automation. Increasing use of AI, and I think there's mixed results that come from that. So I'd love to hear all of your takes on that and kind of where you think that is, where it could go, and what goes along with that. So obviously we're talking about Google, but to a lesser degree, it probably affects Bing as well. But if we talk about that for a little bit,
Brian, first. I mean, so
yeah, like, Brian, I wanted to get your take, in particular on kind of what it means compared to before, and even where it's going to go.
So thinking about like the future, right? Because this is about the future of digital marketing. There's sort of like what I would call like what's happening right now, and then what's fascinating is that, like, you know, if you were to ask me 3 years ago, like where the future of digital marketing would be, I would probably have placed a bet on like AR, VR, because like, you know, like the whole, like that universe of like, hey, that's where it's like, you know, that's where people are starting to move. We're moving into the metaverse. We're starting to do those, you know, all of the Oculus things. I could imagine like, you know, like marketing and advertising happening there, where you've got digital out of home, but it's individualized because it's happening to someone in like an AR, VR thing, right? Google Lens, whatever you want to call these different things. When ChatGPT came out, I think it just completely flipped the script. And I think that, like, you know, when you see now that, like, there really hasn't been and no offense to our partners, Google, because like we've been long-term great partners with Google here at Adtaxi since God knows when, 2013 probably. But I think that like this is the interesting sort of inflection point for us all as consumers. And I think as marketers, we also have to think about like consumers, because that's really what it is, right? So put on your consumer hat first. Like, how are we going to change? How are we going to change in terms of our habits? And what are we going to do differently based on the options available to us? And so when we have now, like yesterday, a client was sent an email saying like, okay, ChatGPT is now offering paid search. How does this impact like what we're doing in our campaigns? And the answer is like, right now, it's still way too early to tell. Because you can actually see in like clients GA4, like, you know, the ChatGPT as a referral source now, where people are starting to pick that up. But they had 73 sessions over the course of like, you know, and these people get hundreds of thousands of sessions a day. So 73 over 30 days says that it's really nascent right now. So as consumers right now, it's like totally on the fringe. I think what's interesting is like what happens when that becomes the mainstream and people start going away from a Google, because they're tired of all of the sponsored links and the sponsored ads, and just this, like, you know, the search engine results page is this just amalgamation of whatever, and you have to pick and choose what you want, but they're throwing so much information at you. The interesting concept for me around like Gen AI and search, and you see this with Google, and I just heard Safari is probably going to do something similar, or Apple's going to do something similar in Safari too. But you know, like basically trying to give you an answer and then giving you options of like where that's coming from, like that's going to dynamically change, I think, how consumers shop and interact with this information. And I think it's going to open a ton of opportunities personally around like, you know, like how we as marketers can be smart about, you know, like the types of campaigns you're running, like the types of things that we're thinking about from like, you know, where to be from like a query standpoint, but also like how we advise clients on what's that user experience like when somebody gets to your website. Because like if somebody's on a site and they come through and it's like, you know, I researched this product and this is, you know, gets 45 stars, you know, but, you know, I highly recommend it, as opposed to something that gets like 10,000 5 stars or whatever. And you go to someone's website and it just doesn't reflect the same sort of like experience you expected it to have, like you may not buy. And so I think that whole concept, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts, but like just as a consumer, like, you know, am I going to trust this anytime soon? Am I going to give up my credit card anytime soon? Right. Or whatever, how it do shopping for me anytime soon. But I think there are like early adopters who would say, you know what, I really don't care. Here's my grocery list, go buy everything, put it in various Instacarts and get it here to me, type of things. I don't know. I'll stop talking. I've had too much caffeine this morning.
So I'm curious, you know, obviously Brian, I love how Brian takes the consumer vantage point first, because ultimately that's what it's all about. That's how Google is going to model. And then they always have modeled their search results pages based on what they think the consumer would interact with most. And then I guess when you're talking about clients that are running search campaigns or agencies, things like that, the changes there, how do they impact our world? How do we need to, again, be the humans in that world? And where does it where does it go, and where do you see the biggest challenges there? And Megan, I see you're ready to jump on it.
I think it's like, yeah, I think it's twofold. I've seen it in a positive way, and I've also seen it in a more negative way, actually. Some of the AI tools that, sticking with the paid search side, that have been released over the years has actually caused things like cost per click to increase, and you lose out on impression share because you're just racing to the top and you're spending top dollar to get there, because that's what the platform believes is going to be the best performing way to do that. So I've even experimented with turning those AI features off and just seeing what more can you garner. It's not always a one size fits all, though. I've actually seen where when you shift away from the smart bidding strategies, that you actually see a negative impact in performance overall. And so you kind of have to weigh it industry by industry, client by client, to determine, is this a client that can support the AI technology that the platforms are pushing out. It's not always the case, because it sometimes can be a negative impact to their overall campaigns.
Yeah, and I can agree with that. Just speaking on the social side of things, I think it is very similar to Google in that sense, with just, I think both of these platforms are pushing out like, yep, the client can do it themselves. It's really easy setup. Just click these buttons and you're off running your campaigns. But just from experience recently, actually this week, onboarding a new client, they have the full, for Meta, it's called Advantage Plus, which is their automation tool. They had the full Advantage Plus shopping campaign going, and it was not performing well. And so I think that's kind of where the benefit of agencies and experts like ourselves come in, is because we can look at it, we can test if it works. I think you have to set it up a very specific way. And then you can kind of A/B test against non-automated campaigns and kind of just see what performs better. And sometimes going more niche with the audiences is actually a better performer than going very, very broad, like how sometimes Meta kind of expects us to run things. So it's a lot of testing, but I'm not opposed to it. I think it just has to be set up the right way for clients.
Why do you guys think that is? Like, for example, you could have two clients in the same industry, same services, similar geographies. But if the website structure, for example, is different, so the conversion path is different, could it be something as simple as that it just affects everything? And then from there, it's a whole different approach that needs to be adopted for that client?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, years ago, they were saying you have to be mobile friendly for your website. Otherwise, like, your ranking is going to kind of fail. So I think that goes along with pretty much everything. I mean, social, you have to make sure the creative is top notch in order to win the bid there. So I don't know. It's probably a bunch of different factors that kind of help automation win that bid as well.
Cool. Well, we have about 7 minutes left, so I wanted to pivot because this is a topic that I know that you guys feel very passionately about, but just there's a changing landscape with audio, the way people listen to anything audio and the way people consume anything on the video side. It's really kind of pivoted more recently. And I personally think for anyone that would need to use those mediums for advertising, it's more advantageous. The barrier to entry, in my opinion, has dropped, but segmentation has clearly brought a more confusing landscape. So I'd be curious to get your guys' take on how that's changed and what you're seeing out there in terms of the embrace. Megan, you're nodding, so I'll start with you again on this. How have you seen your clients embrace this or not so much? And where do you think it sits right now?
I think in some cases, I wish they would embrace it more, to be completely honest. I mean, there's so many opportunities that I've seen just in the trend of things like CTV, video placements becoming more and more prominent. We just did a research study with one of my other clients that shows the decline over the last 4 or 5 years of traditional TV being the primary source of entertainment in the space. And it's insane how much connected TV type of placements have grown over the years. And yet there's so much taboo behind it because they're like, well, my audience isn't there or it's too expensive. But then if you calculate it out, if you're trying to reach the right person, or if you are reaching the right person, it's actually cheaper. And even so, now that there's more people on connected TV devices year over year, those CPMs have actually started to come down a little bit. I mean, we still have a long ways to go to if you want to compare it against pre-roll. But I do think that it's making, when I started in the industry, actually 15 years ago this year, I remember my very first connected TV campaign, and it was $60, $70 CPMs. And now we're looking at 35 and 40, and I mean, even some cases lower. So I think it's just showcasing how much it's improved because there's so much more out there today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Berkey.
I was just going to say, I find it interesting how many people, to make his point, that aren't willing to try this yet. I mean, there's so much available inventory. We've seen that so many people that are using this are willing to spend money, right? The research is out there, and they're not even willing to dabble in it, but they're willing to dabble into something like doing a billboard or something like that, where, again, still not very much attribution tied to it, but, they're kind of sold the, oh, hey, you're going to get an eyeball. Well, Brian, you might see a billboard and it's for you. I might see the same billboard. It's not for me. Right. So it's definitely not targeted to where we can hit, like Megan said, that exact person you're looking for in an environment where they're very engaged. Now, sure, we know they have other devices in their hands, but hey, guess what? We talk about the view through attribution. I see the ad. I go right to Google. I search your product. I'm able to buy it right there. And it's just so underutilized and such a great vessel. It really is shocking.
How many people on this? We were talking about this like right before we started recording, but like podcasts, who listens to podcasts?
Oh yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So like the way that I see this going in the future is we're going to see even a faster rate of fragmentation of like where you can spend your time as a consumer, going back to the consumer, right? So it's like you've got how many different celebrities did you name earlier, Natalie, who like, have different podcasts, from Amy Poehler to whoever. You don't even get into the Kelsey brothers, Bob, or whatever, but like you've got all of these different sort of like podcasts, video blogs, whatever it is that people are out there, sort of like whether they're just pure audio or like a video type podcast too. It's like you've got all of these things out there, but then you've also got ridiculous amounts of different CTV. I don't even want to look at my like cable to like my Amex bill to understand like how many different things I subscribe to every single month, whether it's Peacock, Paramount Plus, whatever, all those things on it, in addition to like cable or whatever. So it's probably like that's going to change. I'm going to have to cut something soon because it's ridiculous, because they're all upping their prices, right? So eventually like they're going to try and force that on you. But I think that like as it's going back to like what's the future for consumers, and it's like there's so many different places where you can spend your time, and as marketers, if you have to like follow the eyeballs or follow the earbuds, like that's a daunting challenge. And I think that like as much of the future of marketing is, we're talking in large parts about like the tech on these platforms. I think like the strategy of like how as a marketer you position your brand in a way like this, it's pretty crazy. Like I think you have to like really take a step back and think through like, okay, where are all the different places that I can reach somebody? And do I design creative around each of those different places to make it sort of, nuanced and native to those things? I mean, TikTok is like another example of that too, where it's like, you spend hours a day just scrolling through TikTok.
Yeah.
So,
And just kind of being on your phone, that's already taking away from, let's say TikTok, they say, is a competitor with YouTube and streamers. Right. So I think that's kind of the future, is making sure we hit all avenues where we can. I think that's really important, not just kind of siloing ourselves into one platform. So I think there's benefit in that.
Awesome discussion, guys. So, just a little bit of time left. I want to thank you guys all for your time and here to celebrate Adtaxi's anniversary / I like to say birthday. But a really great discussion. And I think this is something that we'll obviously continue to see unfold and see how well our fortune telling went today. Great insights. I want to thank you all for your time. and have a great day.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Here's all.
Great.
Thanks, everybody.